Dear viewers, we have with us a special guest today. His name is Dinesh C Sharma, veteran Indian journalist and also author, especially on scientific journey of the country. So here he has written recently a book, Space: The Indian Story. Dinesh C Sharma. Okay, sir. Welcome to NFA Post TV and for interacting with us on your book. What is the genesis of this very book? How you thought of writing this very book on India Space Odyssey?
Thank you for having me. I think it's a very fascinating story. Today, you take space technology for granted. It is part of our lives. We
Correct.
use GPS, we use DTH, we use number of devices which are connected with satellites. So, space technology is impacting our lives every day without even our knowing.
Correct.
It's working at the background. Not just the big missions which we watch, but it's helping people make their lives much easier. But when it started, it was not like this. I want you to take you back to the era of just after India got independence in 1947. We didn't have anything of what we have today.
Absolutely.
The country was in a very bad shape, but the post-colonial period, impacts of colonialism were there. We had a very high illiteracy rate. People were dying of hunger. People were, we didn't have enough grains to feed our people.
Correct.
So in such a situation, how did and why did our, leaders, political leaders and scientific leaders who are advising them think of space technology? I mean, today it is given that space is a must, but in a situation where we didn't have even good engineering colleges, forget about teaching of proper space technology. It didn't exist as an academic discipline, but we didn't have a good educational system. We didn't have a good engineering industrial base. In such a situation, to think of a technology, to think of a new area of science, that itself was, I think, a very bold thing to do.
Okay.
So the most striking part of the Indian space story is that we had a vision to start with. That science can help solve problems of people, problems of poverty, problems of illiteracy, health, and all the problems which India was facing in the 40s and 50s. The leadership at that time thought that science and scientific research could help you solve that problem. So that big vision was there.
Okay.
So out of that, then what were the new emerging areas where India could participate? So that started. So that's how the journey of Indian space program started, not formally with ISRO forming in 1969, but in 57 itself,
Right.
when the international program started for exploring outer space.
Okay.
Sputnik got into space.
Right.
So India was very much there at least at the conceptual level.
Okay.
People are thinking that space technology can be used for national development to solve problems. So I think that vision part is very much that necessary, that right from the beginning we had a pathway, we had thinking that we can do that.
Absolutely.
But how we do that, I think that is the journey even more fascinating, because we had so many other problems to solve.
Okay.
And we could do that. I think that's what I've tried to bring out in this book.
Fantastic. And India's space journey is a motivation for millions of Indians and new age entrepreneurs. So your book is giving two pillars here: the role of ISRO and individuals who paved the way for this growth journey. We have reached what we call in the area of some four giant nations having super technologies. So can you elucidate a bit on these ISRO's journey
Yes.
and the individual who played a pivotal role, starting from Vikram Sarabhai?
Exactly. Because to have a vision is one thing, and to translate it into reality is something else. And for that, you need the right people, as you said.
Okay.
So, luckily, we had a set of people, scientific leaders, as well as among political leadership, who could sit together and devise a way that how to move ahead. And see, in the 50s and 60s, the science was being organized in India. DRDO was being organized. Earlier labs were being shifted out and given their name, a different role. CSR labs were still being set up. So
Correct.
60s was a period where science in the government sector was being organized.
Right.
And Department of Atomic Energy had a big role to play in that. There were two big entities, I would say, CSIR and Department of Atomic Energy at that time.
Okay.
So the space activity was an extension of what Department of Atomic Energy was doing. And ISRO was, before that, Indian National Committee for Scientific Research. It was housed in DAE. And even after ISRO was formed in 1969, it was part of DAE. It got a separate identity later.
Okay.
So we had people who not only thought of a vision, but they also laid down the pathway. Like Sarabhai envisioned that how do we, use space technology for people, because 60s was a decade where people were thinking of the space race, between
Right.
USSR and USA,
Absolutely.
that who would go to the moon first.
Mm.
So he made it clear that we are entering space age, not to reach to the moon or outer big planets and ambitious missions, but
Okay.
to solve our problems. So he thought of using space technology for education, for remote sensing. And the idea of INSAT, the idea of the Indian remote sensing satellite, all those ideas were put down in a big plan in 1971.
Okay.
Of course,
Okay.
Sarabhai did not survive to see them
Fructification of
fructify,
all this, yeah.
but all those ideas were there, that India should have a national satellite, which could be used for education, which could be used for gathering data on weather and all the problems which we had.
Okay.
So that pathway, so that's what then we have to achieve that blueprint. What do you need? You need technology, you need to work on your rockets,
Absolutely.
you need to work on your satellites, you need to work on your applications. So all these things started in parallel.
Absolutely.
Of course, we had many setbacks, and rocket technology is not
Correct.
easy. Nobody was giving it on a platter.
Absolutely, yeah.
Although there was a lot of
Sanctions we had to
yes,
face.
lot of collaboration initially in the 60s
Right.
and 70s. Then we started facing sanctions and all that. So
Yeah.
in all the three departments, rocketry, satellites and application, we started working early on in parallel. So
Okay.
that's what I think, when the program took off in the 80s and 90s, all that came in handy. So to India's space program is a story of technological self-reliance.
Oh.
How do you achieve that?
Okay.
You need a vision, you need people, you need to create a viable infrastructure around that. You mentioned about private industry. So very early on, private industry was involved, because ISRO cannot make those big engines, the metals, and all that. So for that, you needed to collaborate with the industry,
That's right.
make them ready for do that. So ISRO handheld a lot of industries in the beginning. So that's how they had a group of industries, 100 industries to begin with, who could make things for them, small, medium scale and large industries.
Okay.
So that base started building. It
Okay.
became big, and then we have the giants and L&T and Tata and others, but there were several others. You need to outsource your fuel, you need to outsource your subsystems and things like that. So,
Okay.
and if you want to build a rocket multiple times, you need to depend on the big industry.
Okay.
So all that preparation also started very early on.
Fantastic.
So it was not that as if we waited, we'll have the technology, then we'll go to industry. It didn't happen like that. It was going on in parallel.
Correct. So also India's space journey is on a tectonic shift with the advent of what you call this environmental concern, how to come up with green technologies in space industry and multiple applications which will have a ramification on climate change, etc. And also we are now facing the challenge of space debris. So from that perspective, how India should drive this innovation-led ecosystem, and how India should drive for collaboration going forward. What is your take on that, sir?
Yeah, right now I think the space industry globally is going through a churn, you
Okay.
can say transition.
Yeah.
You are not thinking in terms of big geostationary satellite, but you are thinking of a cluster of satellites.
Cluster
No,
of
which
satellites.
so that you are de-risking, and then if one big satellite fails, so all your service comes to a standstill. But if you have multiple, a constellation of satellites, say 1,000 satellites, even if a few fail, your network could run. So there is a shift in terms of technology and its deployment and its usage also.
Okay.
And the building blocks of space technology, for example, materials, fuel cells, navigation system, everything is changing. The satellites are more compact now.
Right.
Rocket systems are changing, like you mentioned about the propulsion systems. People
yeah.
are thinking of new kind of propulsion system.
Ionized and
yeah,
electrical
yeah, a
system,
lot
yeah.
of those are on the horizon.
Right.
And all that is not necessarily coming from the national space agencies like ISRO in India and NASA and other places, a European Space Agency. But there's a private industry which has come up, because if you need to develop things fast, you don't wait for a big organization to work. You start working with the startups. So, and there are working on the new ideas. They are able to develop microsatellites.
Right.
They're able to develop rockets based on new technologies. So that's a big shift I think we are seeing in the world, and also in India, because, and imagine, it's not happened in a vacuum. We are building upon the capability which we have had so far. If you look at the people who are in the startups, either in US or in India or anywhere else, these are the people who have worked in the industry for a long time. Like ISRO people are joining startups.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And
right.
NASA people are all the big startups from SpaceX to everybody. At the back of that is all the experience which has been built all over. The way they are doing things is different, but that collective knowledge is there, which has been built over the decades. So
Okay.
startup system is great, but it is, I'm saying, it is building upon our knowledge so far.
Okay.
And I think it's a big change, and that some of the challenges which you mentioned about debris, environmental safe, so
Yeah.
all those are also being addressed by startups in a multiple way.
Okay. So the thing is that since you mentioned specifically about startups, dual application of this technology and frugal innovations are paving the way for new ways in this Indian space journey. So what is your advice to our new age entrepreneurs? How should they look at the opportunity? What is your take on that, sir?
Yeah, so the basic building blocks remain the same.
Okay.
That is, you need to have a rocket, make it more efficient, reusable,
Oh.
easy to make. So the way you do things are changing. So you need rocketry, you need satellites. So satellite sizes are coming down, different technologies are being put. Then you need applications. So there also we are thinking of new applications. So
Yeah.
startups will continue to work in these 3-4 areas.
Okay.
But how they do, it's totally different. So we need to build, you can't just have a satellite without an application. So right now people are thinking of applications first and doing a specific satellite for that. So the way we do things have changed, but the basic building blocks of the space technology remain the same. So
Okay.
I think startups are working in all the 3 areas. Of course, for a country like India, you need lot many applications. So people
Yeah.
are thinking of in terms of applications for agriculture, in terms of water resource management, in
Correct.
terms of surveillance, in terms of everything. So applications are being developed. For example, this startup was started by a former space scientist. He's working on the SAR radar, which is fixed on a drone, which is a completely dramatically new idea.
Okay.
That instead of having a satellite, you can have that kind of a system technology on a drone itself.
Absolutely.
Because it also depends on your application.
Okay.
If a drone is a constellation of drone is able to do the same as a satellite, why not do that?
Okay.
And integrate some of those technologies. So
Okay.
I think some fascinating things are happening there.
Okay. Sharma sir, since you have seen the growth of ISRO and the what you call Chandrayaan Mission and the Mars mission, so how do you look at the regulatory aspects and how the government is framing these regulation? What more the government resilience and other new tactics the government should adopt so that we can have a faster pace and its application to reach the common people?
Yeah, some kind of a regulatory system has been put in the form of in space.
Okay.
But whenever you talk to industry, we get a feeling that that is not enough.
Okay.
It's just the starting point.
Okay, okay.
We need it's a more of a facilitating agency, but you need a clear-cut regulatory system. Of course, you need a facilitator like the in space is acting in between the private industry and ISRO, but you need still a space law is needed. So you need regulatory and legal framework to implement that. So that is still an area where we need to work.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for speaking to NFA Post TV. Dear viewers, you should buy this book, Space, the Indian Story, from Dinesh C Sharma, to get a ringside view of India's space odyssey, which is known for its frugal innovation and its impact throughout multiple villages in India and globally. Thank you, sir, once again.
Thank you.
To talk to NFA Post TV.
My pleasure.
Right.
Thank you.